Yes, once again, welcome everybody. And now for what you all have been waiting for, our speaker for the month, creator Micheal Jantze. Micheal.
Yay.
Hey guys, how are you all?
Great.
Good. Where should we begin? Should we just start with a general kind of, do you want the long version or the short version? I'm obviously I'm Micheal Jantze. I've had a career that's most people kind of raises an eyebrow at some point with some of the stuff, but the highlights have been working first graduating from film school in Los Angeles and trying to work in animation in the mid 80s, and things didn't go quite well. Just because things were falling apart and jobs were scarce. So I ended up doing a lot of documentary filmmaking, educational filmmaking, and at the same time kept doodling comics from college, as one does who's a cartoonist. Can't seem to put things down. And while I was working on going back to grad school, I started doodling a strip called my college strip for Cal State Northridge was Normal State. And I turned that into Normal USA and started taking those characters and ended up self-publishing a book. And that led to me not going to grad school because I suddenly realized how much I was enjoying writing stories as comics as much as I was enjoying working in film, and that maybe I could achieve some of my goals through comics as much as through film. So it was kind of that first moment where I realized, you know, you turn that first corner creatively where what 15-year-old you thought they wanted was a little wrong, but 23-year-old you knew that was still a good idea. Just you could direct that stuff into a different activities. So instead of working on feature films and so forth, and what I thought I was going to work on, either animated feature films or live action feature films, I ended up starting just writing my own comics. So that led to a deal with DC Comics. Kind of strangest thing, I had put this self-published book in bookstores in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, and a couple of towns in the Midwest where I'd lived. And out of the blue, one person called and left a thing on my answer machine and said he was a cartoon agent. And so through that came we worked on some stuff, and the one place he thought he could take it was a little small press called Piranha Press, which was owned by DC. And so they wanted to buy this Normal USA book, but by then I had sent it to the syndicates as a daily strip submission. And I had a call back from one of the syndicates and some nice responses. So I was like, oh, I'm so close on this. I don't want to do this with DC. So I sold them another idea and worked on that for a few years. And then I got into journalism because I didn't need to live in LA. So I took a job at a newspaper and became a graphic editor and artist, and eventually ended up at the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, working with quite a few talented artists and becoming the graphics editor there. And between the DC deal and that job, I was just worn out, and I wasn't getting to the development. I had a development deal with United Media by that point for one version of this thing. And it was just awful. You know, I just felt lost. So I kind of packed everything up. I got out of management and moved back to California, and took a job at a smaller paper so that I could just kind of focus on my strip at night. Big gamble, if you know what I mean. It was kind of one of those big choices in life of like, you know, if I'm going to do this, I better do it while I'm young. And it panned out. One of the things I'd asked for when they hired me was that they give me room on this is before the internet, that they give me room on the comics page for a comic I wanted to draw. And it wasn't Normal USA. I just was going to come up with this other thing. And so I took my journal that I'd been keeping, a graphic journal and so forth, and kind of started putting ideas together that eventually became the norm. And again, the only reason all these things are named Norm for a reason, because I grew up in a town in Illinois called Normal. And so that was kind of the word that just stuck. And so the norm, I was surprised that nobody had ever used the norm for anything. So it was like, oh, that makes sense. It's kind of a wacky guy who's not the norm and all that. So So they ran that in the paper for about 6 months, and then I sent that package off to the syndicates, and I got 2 syndicate offers. So I had figured out, and I just knew drawing it daily was going to solve and kind of finish finessing all that stuff that had never worked before, where, you'd send in some stuff and then they'd give you some ideas and, all that. But yeah, just doing it daily for 6 days a week was what I needed to kind of finish that up. So unbeknownst to me, one of the editors had gone into the hospital for surgery. And so she wasn't returning my calls. And so I went with King Features. Years later, I found out what actually happened. And I was like, that's kind of weird. So King was excited about the strip, and we launched in about 40 papers. And so I did the strip then. I had a 15-year contract and I had an 8-year break. So I did the strip in syndication for 8 years. And right behind me was Zits. And the sales stopped, everything kind of dried up, and it was, we were slowly picking up papers here and there, and we got up to about 78 papers. And then we were over 100 papers total over the time of the ones that had quit and so forth. But, I was just stuck at this kind of middling salary. And I had, by then also I'd moved back to California, and I was living in Marin County, and a neighbor asked me if I wanted to interview for a job. And so I went in, and that was at Industrial Light and Magic. So I ended up doing storyboards for a while for some commercials. And then I had to go home because I was designing websites for the New York Times newspaper group after I'd left journalism. And then about 6 months later, they called with a full-time job. ILM did. So then I was on feature films from kind of Save It Private Ryan on for about 5 years. And so I had everything I ever wanted. I had a baby. I had, this is how you know God exists, because you get everything you want on the exact same day, and you can't do it all, But yeah, I had my comic strip. I was working in film again, and I had a brand new baby with my wife. And so we did what we could. And eventually she took a job, and I got to stay home and be the stay-at-home dad and take care of that and work on the strip a little bit more and work on some other projects. So that was kind of the early 2000s. And then we had a second kid. And at that point, I was at that 8-year break, and it was like, I think I had left ILM at that point, and I just realized, I needed to go back and make the money I could make in my lifetime. So I had some friends that wanted me to pitch some shows in LA, and I just wasn't into it. I didn't like it. I didn't want to live in LA again. And then I didn't have a big burning desire to have an animated TV show. For me, it was always longer form stuff. And then I just loved the short form comics. So instead, I opened an animation studio and used all that stuff that we had done at ILM for clients like YouTube and Humana and Hilton Hotels and other hotel companies and so forth. So all that stuff's up on YouTube and buried. So I did that for a while, and then I taught animation and down at Savannah College of Art and Design. And then when I left that little gig, after a few years, we moved back to California. And I basically got a job in an education company doing what I was doing with my animation studio. We basically built a low-cost 2D animation studio to build all these educational modules for online learning, for Cengage learning. And that was just a riot. We worked on some National Geographic Spanish translation videos. I think we did 500 minutes of animation over the course of about a year and a half for them, for all these modules on learning Spanish as a second language. It was a lot of fun. So that led to Amazon, and now I've been in Amazon for the last 5 years in Amazon publishing. And I retired the strip officially last year at the 25-year mark, because GoComics had taken all the archives, and then I had started doing a weekly version of the Norm for about 6 years or 7 years. So I've got an agent now, and I'm moving on to that next scary thing. And I just took over all the children's books at Amazon Publishing. We're an actual publishing house. It's apub.com, and it's agented. So we've got everything from Dean Koontz to Minda Kaling to, we just did a series that will be coming out with Guillermo del Toro. But we also work with, published authors and so forth. So we've got a lot of different stuff we're doing inside this business. But I'm now back to being a print art director. I had to get out my old newspaper CMYK model knowledge and and go to press runs again and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of been full circle back to the late 80s, early 90s in terms of some of that, and designing, art directing book covers, and then 32-page books for, obviously we do about 25 children's books a year. And we do some translated children's books from other countries as well. So kind of a little bit of a balancing act right now, and then moving on to that next thing in life. It's one of the reasons I came down to San Luis Obispo this weekend in California to just hang out with my old mentor, Jerry Scott, and kind of chat with him about, what do I do next in life and all that. But so, as all of you are, it's always a work in progress, right? So that's my 25-cent tour of the last 40 years. I apologize. So if it was a little over 25 cents. Should we go to questions, or what should we do next, Bill?
Oh, whatever works for sort of anybody have some questions?
I could talk a little bit about what I did with the Norm, which was kind of a weird strip in that Jay Kennedy, my editor at King for years, had said, he goes, I always took it as a backhanded compliment. He said, "You're the cartoonist, and that I was always working more on the form stuff." If you guys have read that McCloud Understanding Comics book, Scott McCloud's book on that, he kind of breaks out, maybe it's in Making Comics. Yeah, in Making Comics, he breaks out kind of the 4 personalities of creative people, and that some people are these people that just want to create content, like Charles Schultz. He just made something, and he didn't worry about what it was. Mm-hmm. And then there are people that are really into form and structure and so forth, like Little Nemo, where you're breaking the rules of visual, design and visual storytelling and all that sort of stuff. And there's a couple others in there, obviously, too. But I kind of think I always fell into that category of, with Norm breaking the fourth wall. I'd gotten that idea from first Annie Hall, the Woody Allen film, where he opens the movie, talking to the camera. I just love the idea of being inside somebody's head like that you got this stand-up moment. And then, having studied writing and all that, I just love the idea of an unreliable narrator, like a Holden Caulfield, who's kind of bullshitting you. It's his version. It's the guy at the bar telling you what a bad day he had at work, and the facts aren't all right. And you're asked to, to comply and agree with what's going on. We all have questions when our friends are telling us things like that, of like, did that really happen exactly that way? And so that was always the balance in the Norm, was taking what he told you against what really happened, and playing against those panel, the panels that were voiced over and what you saw. That was kind of some of the fun comedic tension and humor that I played with. And it was one of the things that Jay just loved about the strip. He just thought it was such a fun way to kind of modernize that. And I had also seen it, the other show that had it was on HBO with Gary Shandling's original show, not Larry Sanders, but the Gary Shandling show, where he literally stop and turn to camera. And that's where those 2 ideas came from. Like, I think this would work in comics as well, because there's always narration. Why can't we see this person? And so I love that idea of having sort of that a little more of that kind of personal POV of the comics. So that was the original intention of the strip. And over time, I realized that there was some other things that I started playing with, like just consumerism in general, which is we're so focused around what we own and what we wear and what we listen to and what we read and so forth, that sort of became a theme in the strip. And so on the Sunday strips with the throwaway panel, I started just doing product labels, but with Norm on it. So it would be the Starbucks cup, but it'd say Norm Bucks, and, just redesign the logo around whatever he was about, and just that sort of thing. And that gave me a lot of fun to also play with my graphic design that I wasn't using much after I'd left both film and newspapers. And then when I rebooted the strip with Norm as a family, and I named that 4.0 because there's 4 people in it, I realized I was kind of maybe done with a lot of those old themes, that things had changed, over the years. And I thought about that the bad guys in the strip also had changed, the people, the foils that he had and so forth. And that his two friends had both become much more allies than they were in the past, where it was always he and Ford or he and Renee were arguing, and they all represented a different part of people in their late 20s, and how they felt about things, and that gave him a way to argue with stuff. And so I kind of redesigned the strip around the idea that I was at all the Norm 4.0 strips. I think most every one of them deals with time and Norm's things getting broken in time. And so I changed the overall theme of the strip that way. And that kind of guided me through, what I was writing, and helped me not write just the same old gags with a married guy that he was kind of playing with. And so the kids could be aging, the kids would actually age through, toddler to teenager in 6 panels sometimes. And that would be what the joke was about, was that he wasn't paying attention to the present or something. There was one gag where Norm's talking to his son on a bench, and the son starts aging into an old man, and then he realizes he's talking too long. He's just been monologuing the whole time, that kind of thing. And so that was kind of always the visual pun that I was playing with, was things like that. I did bringing up Jerry Scott again, I did a strip where the Taylor was asking for a new bike at the bike store, and Norm says something like, again with last week it was this, and then it was this, and now it's bikes. What's it going to be next? And then Jeremy walks by, tapping on his phone at 80 miles an hour with his headphones on. And in the 5th panel, Norm's just covering his son's eyes. So, but that was another way to play with time. Like, this is what's coming. So anyway, that's kind of what I did with Norm over the years, to have fun with, where to come from on writing the gags and so forth. So that it wasn't just, a strip about a guy and his friends or something. It always was, it had these kind of undercurrents that helped me choose whether or not it was a good joke or the right joke, or whether it was worth, doing a series on, and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Oh, question for Michael. Hey, John, how are you?
Hi. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, John. Let's see, could I talk about my single panel comic? Oh, yeah, Studio Jantze. Yeah, so I don't know what I'm doing there yet. And I think that's what's fun about it, is that was a little bit of walking on fire. When I retired the strip last year, GoComics said, well, you want to do anything else, or you just want to archive the strip and go on? And I went, well, I've been doing these little doodles. We could put those up. And then I could kind of go where I want to go. And last year I did them daily, and it just about crushed me. And not in a bad way. It was turning into work, and it was supposed to be joyful. So I switched it to do occasional now. I'm doing them 2 or 3 times a week, and when I damn well feel like it. And one of the reasons I did that was just financially. GoComics in the last 2 years has changed, and Google Ads has done this. We've all lost so much revenue on there in terms of percentages. It's been kind of double-digit dives in ad revenue and so forth, that it's kind of like, this is hobby money. So that's how I'll treat this. I can't pretend like I'm trying to create something here. So, but I usually do Mr. Lux, and he was my little animated character I did for the LXR hotel chain, which eventually Hilton Hotels bought. Is that right? No, I got that wrong. The investor who owned LXR bought Hilton. So now it's under the Hilton brand. And it was that evil Blackstone real estate guy, Steve, what's his name, that owned this LXR hotel. But what they wanted was they had bought all these old Wyndham hotels up back in about 2005. And this connection actually came through my wife, through one of her old mentors when she had worked in hotels. And so Susan had called me up and said, hey, we've got this problem where we bought these hotels, they're putting billions of dollars into them to turn them into these grand, just wonderful kind of hip hotels and so forth. But the problem is staffing these hotels with 5-star European service. They wanted kind of that Ritz-Carlton level of service. Was there's just not those people in America. And so they were going to start bringing people in from Switzerland and Brazil and so forth on these H-2Bs and J-1, whatever you call those things, visas. And so they needed to be able to train the people. And so we got chatting, and I said, well, Disney did a lot of educational work as well as all their shorts. And during World War II, they did a massive amount of educational film. And out of that, post-war came a lot of educational film work that most of us all saw, in high school, 16 millimeter films at some point. There's so many of these kind of films. There's a company up in Detroit that had done a lot of it. And I said, I think what we could do is basically come up with a Pink Panther character who doesn't talk and just shows off these things. And so anyway, that's where Mr. Lux came from. We made up a couple of 5-minute videos on service and that, and they were training videos, but YouTube had just started, and I put the video up on YouTube, and it had like 500,000 hits in a week because there wasn't a lot of groovy, kind of Fritz Frayling, Patty Frayling, Pink Panther type animation, UPA style animation. So it was weird. So suddenly, and I had negotiated, so I owned the character. So he had a little life on his own. And when I started doing the sanity sketches, at first it was Norm and so forth. And then I just decided, I should play around with some other characters. And I kept coming back to him because he's kind of a Mickey Mouse character. I can do anything with him. I can make him a boy or a girl. I can make him a mouse. I can dress him up in Star Wars stuff, or, put him over here. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like, I started doing little sanity sketches on Instagram every day for people to watch while I drew them. And that's kind of what I've been doing with the with the sanity sketches in Studio Jantze. Let's see, any examples of upcoming art you could share? No. I'm working with an agent right now, and he wants me to do all this middle grade book stuff. And once again, I don't think I'm feeling it. I think so many of my friends, I'm sure many of your friends are putting this stuff together and getting published. I just saw another 2-book deal the other day for another friend doing some of these middle grade books. And that graphic novel stuff, it's so much work. And when I was doing that book with DC Comics back in the 80s, I hated it. I don't like drawing that much. I think that's why the 3 to 4 panel daily strip was fun, that, you go home and I had to do 6, 7 a week. Yeah, of course. But that graphic novel stuff is just insane. I see so many people doing these, and I kind of like for me, I like that format of the Diary of the Wimpy Kid, where you have a little more text and so forth. And I see people doing that, but I don't know how much longer that's going to last. The middle grade stuff's super hot. During the pandemic, I took some classes up here at the Hugo House in Seattle. They've got some picture classes and so forth. So I just took one class on procrastination, which my agent made fun of. He was like, yeah, so now you're taking a class procrastinating about procrastinating. And he was told that was $500 kind of wasted. But I sort of needed to see that other people were like struggling as much as I was with, you have to get, I don't know about you guys, but I have to get past myself at some point, and I have to trick myself out of thinking too much and just get back to the joy of things. And then something bubbles up. And what bubbled up last summer was a couple of children's books ideas that had been in my head and kind of doodling for years. My agent doesn't work in that area, so he's not interested in it at all. But that's what I ended up working on. I don't know if I'm self-sabotaging myself or whether I'm just following the real me. So yeah, let's see, we have the Marin Independent Journal in common. Yeah, Steve, of course. How are you? You're at the bottom of my screen. Are you still in Santa Barbara?
No, I'm in Los Angeles County now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Wonderful. Yeah. You were down in Santa Barbara in that area for quite a long while, right?
Ventura County, yeah.
Yeah, Ventura, that's where you were. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And Steve did work at the IJ as well. I think you were before me, right?
No, I was
Oh, you were after. Okay.
2002.
Oh gosh, okay, yeah, yeah. I'd left newspapers by then. Yeah, I was there. Let's see, I was there 94 to 96, and John Mavroudis was there at the time with me, who just a wonderful illustrator. He's on Instagram, but he's done so many Time magazine covers now. It's just been exciting to see him launch into that sort of stuff. He's the one who does all the portraits with the words for that tone the face. They're just gorgeous. And then he's done his other big thing. Every time I go to the Fillmore in San Francisco, half of the posters are his from recent concerts. So he did the Fillmore posters for years and years.
Was that the newspaper that you started, The Norm?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, there's an editor there, Mike now, who's retired. I'm sure he was gone by the time you were there, but yeah, I'd gone in for the interview and I'd told him, I'd go, look, I'll come here. I'd turned down the Kansas City Star as an assistant editor of sports. My next thing was to go off to, a bigger metro paper from New Orleans. And I said, I don't want to get out of journalism, but what I want to get back to being a single contributor so that I can work on this stuff at night. And he was like, yeah. But about 3 months after I started there, here I came with the first stack of 24 or so. And he goes, oh my God, you were serious. So and I had shown him that there was room on the comic page without dropping anything. All we had to do was like scooch things around a little bit. So that was it. They'd paste me in every day, and I had to have my strips in, and those are the ones I sent off for the syndicates that time around. And I should have asked, like I said, I should have maybe waited a little longer. I loved King. King was. I was talking with Jerry last night, and we were talking about how much King takes care of cartoonists. That a lot of the other syndicates, they like to share responsibilities a bit more, but King really just, I got an offer to go on a trip, King would pay for it, and I didn't have to pay half of it. It was just, they were just a little more deeper in the pockets, I guess, because of Hearst or something. And I don't know if that was because of Bill or who it was, but I heard that a lot from people. Over the years, there was a syndicate that the Chicago Tribune used to own and the LA Times called Tribune Media. And it was down in Florida. And a couple of my friends had gotten syndicated in the 80s with a strip. And they had to pay for the sales brochure. Yeah. So they got a $6,000 bill for their brochure, that kind of a thing. And it was like, God, I don't want that. So I literally quit submitting to, a place like that. And Creators was sort of the same way. A lot of the Jim Toomey of Sherman's Lagoon had left because at some point they were just nickel and diming them on like, oh, we're all in this together. And it was like, yeah, maybe not. So I think Jerry and Rick left. They took Baby Blues out of it. I think Baby Blues was at Creators first before it went to King. If I remember correctly, I think that's where it was. But yeah, let's see. So you said earlier to Norm. Yeah, that was the IJ. Yeah. And it was still called The Norm then. I just, I didn't know what to call the strip, and I knew I wanted a common name, and I didn't want to name him Mike. So it was kind of like, oh, I guess I'll name him Norm because Norm's Norm, and I came from Normal. And then his friend Renee is French for queen, and it's really pronounced Ren. But that was my then wife's middle name, and that was the easy way to not have strife in a marriage, was to take your wife's middle name and put it on a character. And Ford was an amalgam of about 3 of my friends, but it was the name of my first car make. I had a Ford Mustang in high school, so that's where he got his name. So let's see. Donna wrote graphic novels only do 1 page at a time, and you'll end up in a. Yeah. Have you been doing that at all, Donna? Is that? I can't get past like an outline.
No, I know I've done, dozens of comic books, and, you put them together, graphic novels, whatever, but just think of them as 1 page at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go ahead and rough out the whole thing at once if you want, but you don't have to kill yourself over it. And just think of it about, I'm getting this page done.
Yeah. That's how I did that first self-published book. was just one comic at a time. And then I had decided that I'd throw a little thread of a story in there, and slowly it turned into his uncle died, and then they had to go back to the funeral, and then pretty soon I started planning chapters out a bit. I started working ahead a little bit, but good advice. I mean, maybe that would work, but
Well, a lot of people think it's harder than it is. It's really, it's like with me, I get a bunch of scrap paper and some pens, and I just start writing the story and scribbling it out. And, I can go up to 64 pages, 100 pages or whatever. And then when I come time to actually do it, I just lay the good paper on top of the sketch on a light table.
Yeah.
And then you can, and if you don't like the order it's in, you can cut these sketches apart or glue them in or make notes on them or whatever you want. And then when you get done, you've got, you just ink on top. Well, I ink on top. You can pencil it. You can do it any way you like. I just have a tendency to ink on top of the light table sketch.
Yeah.
And that way, and I like to do the whole book first, just as a light drawn out ideas and sketches, because then when you get to the end, you're not going, oh my gosh, I forgot to do this. So they're not as stressful as you think if you just, step back, take your time and enjoy yourself.
Yeah. It's funny. When I did, there's a graphic novel Norm book called Knocked Out Loaded, where Norm sort of has his pre-midlife crisis after his wife has a miscarriage. And you don't know that for quite a while in the story, what he's all stressed out about, because again, he's not telling you because he doesn't want to talk about it. And so, but I did it the same way. Yeah, I decided that I would do it. I did the strip online after I left syndication. A lot of fans had written and said, we'd love to, for you to keep going. And I did that for a year. And then I realized, oh my God, this is as much work as, why did I leave syndication to do this? And it was when I was starting up the animation studio. And so the next year, I just started drawing a little story every day, and I decided I'd see where it go. I cheated a little bit because I had an outline for the story. It was going to be my second book that was contracted when I had my DC comic. So I knew the arc, but I didn't really know what, was going to go on in the story. And putting Norm in that character, and originally it was a female executive that worked at a ad agency, and she goes skiing and loses her memory, blah, blah, blah. So I decided I'd put Norm in there and see what happens with that, and what kind of issues would come up. So yeah, kind of
Doesn't
cool.
sound like you've got any problem with graphic novels. Sounds like you're doing just fine.
No, I never finish them though. So
well, some of them
finished one.
They get to that.
Finished one, yeah.
Pick a page and say, I'm done.
I think smaller chunks. It's that old baby steps thing from What About Bob, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Hey, David, you said making a strip, were there times where you had no gags, no ideas? Yeah, so the best advice I ever got on that was from Charles Schultz. He had said, just draw your characters doing things. So what he did when he started every day was he just started doodling. And Jay Kennedy had also said something fairly similar, which was, well, everybody does things differently. And between those two comments, that kind of, I never really had a writer's block per se, because the characters by then, with a comic strip, the characters are set. And so it just became a matter that, if I do a Norm, waking up in the morning, how does he do that different than other people? And, what can I find out about his character if I do that? And so Sparky had also said, like, you're going to have to, eventually, I was syndicated for about 6 months, and it was in his paper in Santa Rosa, which was between that and being in my folks' papers. It's the only two papers I cared about, The rest of it was like, yeah, whatever. We got Cleveland. Okay, fine. Whatever. Don't lose Santa Rosa. But, and so it was great. What he had said was, he goes, you're going to run into a problem where you're going to have to come back and visit gags again, because my strip at first didn't return to anything, because I had so much room and so many things I could explore. Like I could talk about, you know, the HR person at work or your coworkers, or, you know, going to your favorite diner and not being able to get in, or, you know, all these kind of things, and friends that have money, friends that are planning for the future, friends that are getting engaged. You know, there's all these kind of things I was doing, and I wasn't really coming around again. And Sparky had said at one point, just like, you're going to need Dagwood moments. And I just love that he brought up Blondie of all strips, but he goes, your characters are going to do the same thing again in a comic strip. There's too many days in the life of a comic strip. And that got me to thinking between the, you know, what do characters do? And then how do they do it? And so that's when I came up with the Norm wakes up on the floor every morning sight gag that kind of became one of the icons of the strip. And I just always loved drawing that because his chin just collapses into his head completely. It makes no sense, in anatomy. It just wouldn't happen that he'd lay on a floor like that. But it's just a funny way to draw that drawing. So that's one of those draw funny drawings things that he always said: draw your characters doing funny things. And another one that came out of it was then after at the 5-year break in the strip, I had Norm he woke up married. Yeah, exactly. And that was the other part. It was a little bit of a wink at the little Nemo that, yeah, he's crashed on the floor like a ballistic rocket. But 5 years in the marriage, yeah, or 5 years in the strip, Norm just woke up married. Literally on January 1st, he's in bed with his friend Renee, and now it's his wife. And the Atlanta Journal actually published a story on the front page that says, "Don't write us. They got married and you don't know it," because they didn't want the letters. And I got hate mail from people telling me that I've got people having sex without being married and I'm going to burn in hell. And all I did was I kindly wrote back and just said, wait till Friday, because all week long he's slowly figuring it out. Like, wait a minute. And then all of a sudden he realizes he's married. And then in the strip on Sundays, I did the backstory. I did this thing called the 12 Steps to Marriage, which I turned into a comic book. Okay, I made another comic. Yeah, right. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, but anyway, gave you the backstory, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do a year or two of them engaged because it's happy. There's not a lot. All that stuff is kind of confected, you know, we got to get to the church on time, or, the caterer quit, or just, blah, blah, blah. It just wasn't kind of regular life stuff. It was like a J-Lo movie that you don't want to watch all year long in the comic page. You can take an hour and a half of that stuff, a good romantic comedy. But 40 Weddings and a Funeral, brilliant movie. But you wouldn't want that to play out for 365 days in a comic strip. So anyway, that's what I did there. And when I did that, though, I realized that one of my running gags always was Norm eating breakfast cereal. I think the strip was in about its 8th month after he woke up married. And I realized I had quit doing Norm eating breakfast gags because, some of the gags where he'd pour the milk directly in the box and say something like, no middleman, eliminate the middleman, or he'd be playing playing basketball with the hay bale, the whatever those things are, the shredded wheat hay bales, whatever. And so what I did was I wrote a week of strips of him waking up every morning and Renee's made eggs for him and he's still eating cereal, and like how that would progress and how that would kind of piss her off. And then I realized, like, well, that's kind of lame. I don't want to run 6 of those. I should just pick the best one and move on. And then I went, wait a minute, what if I put them only on Mondays for like a month? And people caught on the 3rd one that I was gonna keep doing this gag every Monday. And I started getting email like, oh my God, you did it again. And then I quit. And then I got mail like, wait, no. But it was funny how fast people picked up on the cadences in the strip of like, oh, on Mondays, Norm will be stupidly eating cereal while his wife's made him a hot breakfast. But that was one of those that, going back to that, like, what do you learn from people and how do you not find those gags, was like to go back and play with that stuff again. Okay, like what's changed here? And is there a different dynamic? Yeah, there's another person in the room at breakfast now. You're married. So, what's different? And then, to do that with the kids eventually and, play with some of that stuff. It was an easy way to do that. So, yeah. Let's see. Any other questions? Anybody have better stories than mine?
I
I'm
don't
just
have a better, oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
I don't have a better story, but when you started talking about the food, it just made me think of my father. Plus, you kind of look like him too. But he would always say, don't play with your food. But he didn't mean that at all. He was being impish.
Yeah.
You should play with it. Whereas my mother would be like, don't play with your food. And she meant it.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. That's the exact same line, but the intonation changes everything.
Yes.
Yeah. And I did a gag once where everybody asked him the same question, but it wasn't the same question. You know, that same sort of thing. I can't remember what it was. There's one where I'm never good at remembering the gags, but anyway, at the end it was like same question. I can't remember how I phrased it, but it was clever, and you'd laugh. So I do remember one where I had the in-laws or his parents had come to visit for Christmas, and he's poking his head out of the shower, and he gives his wife a kiss and says Merry Christmas. And then they're making the bed, and he gives her a kiss and says Merry Christmas. And then they're in the kitchen, and he's giving her a kiss, and he says Merry Christmas. She goes, why do you keep saying Merry Christmas? He goes, because as soon as my parents get up, it isn't going to be Merry Christmas. You know, it was just that, you know, playing with those little cadences over time. You know, like this is going to be a shit show once Pops is out of bed. So, you know. I think I had a running gag always that as soon as his dad showed up, he had to have the plunger, you know, in hand. It was that kind of thing. So, and then I played with in the strip. I always called Norm's parents the folks, and I called his in-laws the parents or whatever. And so they had different monikers. And then in the strip, you never got to see Norm's parents. They were 5-year-old drawings of what a 5-year-old would draw of their parents. So it was really sloppily drawn, but they'd be in frame. And it was because he hadn't really ever resolved his adult relationship with them yet. So he was still just always a 5-year-old around them and kind of underneath their thumbs. But that was one of the visual ways always playing with that. And then honestly, sometimes it was just a cheap way to get through a strip. You know, if you needed to finish a strip real quick, get out, do a gag where they're children's drawings. Oh
yeah, you learn those tricks fast.
Yeah, that one kind of worked out. But yeah, so that's an example of that. I think that's interesting that your mom and dad had that same sort of reaction to things with totally different meaning.
Oh yeah, my father was so funny, and as he always said, we get our turds twisted instead of words twisted. Yes.
I know, I love that. That's absolutely bizarre. My grandmother had two favorite ones. This is my mom's mom. One of them was if wishes were fishes, we'd all have some fried. And that's anytime you came in the room with, I wish I had, you know. That was just her response to everything. So.
I don't think I'd ever heard that variation of that saying. Very cool.
Yeah, so kind of that North Dakota Norwegian woman thing. So yeah, definitely like zip it up and hang in there. Yeah. You know, getting back to those projects and how to handle that is, you know, what I decided to do last October or so was just kind of calm down a bit. The pandemic's really made things a lot rougher, and I just decided to take it a little easy and get back in that mode of not striving to get things done, and you know, allow myself you know, a little more freedom for some of the weirdness and whatnot. Of course, as soon as I did that, my day job just got extremely interesting for 3 months, and all that has calmed back down now. But yeah, it was I think one of the things that I've learned through the pandemic is to get back to taking more things in, reading more, listening more music again, and trying to get back to thinking about. I told my Patreon fans the other day that I think what's important right now is not to write the thing that the 20-year-old me didn't finish. It's to write the thing that I am now. And with the pandemic and all this, it's a little hard to kind of know where we are. So I've been trying to give myself some room to that and figure out exactly, just kind of screw around a little bit. So in that way, that the sanity sketches helped with that a little bit. And when they were getting a little too busy and they were taking up too much of my time, it was back off that too, and quit being so thirsty for whatever's next and trying to get somewhere too quickly.
I know I've found the pandemic to be a bit of a catch-22. At one level, it's everything you said it is, but at this other level, with the being cooped up and everything, I've got my buffer up to a month.
Yeah. My coworkers, when I went home, they were like, "Oh my God, how are you? How's it going?" I'm going, "I used to do this for a living. This is fine." Not commuting gave me back, 2 hours or so of quality dog walking time and thinking time and doodling time. So yeah, I haven't minded it that much. It can get lonely, but I'm certainly alone. I don't think I ever get lonely. I'm not that kind of person that even I've actually, I don't know about you guys, but I had to give myself permission here the last 6 months to just binge watch stuff, because I've never watched a lot of these shows that everybody knows. Everybody's always like, "Oh, have you seen this?" And it's like, no, I'm at home drawing a strip usually if I'm not here, and so it's been great. I watched, oh God, what did I just finish? Well, I'm halfway through that Only Murders in the Building. I'm loving that. And just finished Around the World in 80 Days on PBS, and it's silly and fun. It's not too serious, but there's a new version of that. And I've just kind of taken things in a little bit and sitting on the couch with the dog. It's kind of been nice. And if you guys have tips, please let me know. Yeah. Oh, you did NYPD Blue. Good for you, Donna. I've never seen Seinfeld full run. And I thought, that might be something to go back and catch one of the great shows. That I was in New Orleans working, so that was always on while I was at work at the newsroom. So yeah, I miss so much of Seinfeld. Yeah. Oh, Charlotte. Yeah. Hey.
Hi, hope you can hear me. You
Yeah,
mentioned the middle school type genre,
Yeah.
Diary of Wimpy Kid. I keep on wondering, is there some type of similar genre available, since we've got aging America, and a lot of times aging people just don't have the same patience, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Do you
Yeah,
see
no, I mean,
anything like
that kind of
that?
answers that. Remember that our parents' generation, they've got like the truncated Reader's Digest version of novels. Like Reader's Digest always does short versions of novels that you can just read in Reader's Digest, because my parents had that for years. It was always sitting in the house. So yeah, how would shorter not be better for some people? I think that's a great point. Or half illustrated or an illustrated version of that. It's one of the things we were working on when I first got to Amazon Publishing. What we were working on was a project called Kindle in Motion, and we were just a decade before our time. People didn't know they wanted it, but what it was like those Harry Potter illustrations. They were just boiling, with kind of a cinematographic and some motion, and we could do that with a photo or video. We could do that with animation, and we tried all the genres, and of course we just didn't see a lot of conversion in numbers and so forth to keep it going. And a lot of the projects were extremely expensive. We even did 2 Harry Potter books. So you can go up the illustrated versions of Harry Potter. And so if you buy them, they're, the cover moves and all that. We did some Dean Koontz books. We did some real life or true life crime books by Harold Schechter called Bloodlands. That was a real fun series. But, people didn't know they needed it yet. And I think sometimes if it's cheap to do, it's worth exploring. And I think that's a great idea. I might even, just steal that. But I don't know about you guys. I always want to do like kids books for adults.
Yeah,
And,
that's what I'm thinking of, because
yeah.
I mean, I'm taking care of my parents right now, and I see
Yeah.
my dad mention. So I'm thinking it would be nice to be able to give him something that would be a simplified version.
Mhm.
He would never be able to follow along with Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But if it was something like a simplified version of what is this all about anyway, that kind
Mhm.
of thing, that might be kind of cool.
Yeah. And that's what Reader's Digest used to do. They take, Grand Hotel and boil it down to 50 pages instead of, 500 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
that was my thought, because I like those middle school. I always like the youth books anyway.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool to do that for adults.
Yeah. Terry Liebenson's been doing some really great ones her characters for those middle grade books. And I think she's got some really well-developed characters that aren't just kind of these prototypical, smart mouth kids that I see in a lot of these books where, everybody's just sort of a Pollyanna or like a Ted Lasso character, or somebody who's much more of the smart ass and whatnot. But I've really liked her books. I think they've got more of a gentle tone to them, and they're a little more genuine. And I think if you wrote for adults, that would really be interesting to get into, what kind of themes you could go into. One of the adult children's books was "Why Doesn't My Prostate Work?" Something like that. And just 32 pages of cancer recovery. I think that's, somebody buy that just for the title. Be blank inside. Anyway, but yeah, good question, good idea. Anybody else? That was, I appreciate that. Yeah, there's a book of etiquette. That's probably been done.
No, I illustrated one. A woman wrote a book, a serious book.
Oh, once did I? Oh, I didn't see the once. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a serious book about etiquette in the BDSM community, and oh my gosh, they're so tight about their etiquette.
Yeah.
Who you're allowed to talk to and everything else. And so I illustrated that, and as well the strap-on book, which is a serious book about how not to hurt yourself while using sex toys.
Yeah, there's a, oh yeah, it sort of reminded me of the "Oh Boy, a Sex Toy" comic, which is mostly reviews of them. As for the BDSM, there's this comic called The Sunstone, where it's not specifically etiquette, but it's sort of handling all of the members of the community as perfectly ordinary people who are talking about then obviously the being sane and safe is a major way of surviving your kink.
Yes. What is it? One of the major instructions when it comes to kink is, don't do this as amateurs. Get a professional. You can hurt yourself. No, seriously, that's what they say.
No kidding. The PJ O'Rourke, I used to read his stuff in high school. And he was super popular in the 70s. I'm sure he was around and had a large influence after that, but I don't know if he was in Mother Jones or whatever I was reading him in at the time, but it was one of those magazines that he was always in, maybe Lampoon or something.
I think it was Lampoon, at least that's what
okay. Yeah.
Not counting his collections, I was aware of him being in Lampoon.
Yeah, that was my I had an older brother and that stuff. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Dan. Yeah. My brother, that stuff was always being shuffled to me from the corner room in the house, like, here, check this out. So fully not ready to understand half the stuff that was being thrown at me, but that's what you get with an older brother. I wrote a Mr. Lux ABC book a little while back, and then put it aside. I wrote a norm book, a children's book about feelings that was all the kind of happy, sad, but the drawings didn't match. The whole thing was to kind of play against all those kind of children's things. But I think that those are only kind of these pastiches that don't really serve the reader to the point of really resonating with them. And they're more of a gift buy, and then which is fine, but I like when I am able to connect with people. And so I think to try to actually write a book, a middle grade book for an adult or something like that's an interesting idea. Oh, it was just the Lux stuff. It's I can't. Well, do I have it with? No, I don't even have it with me. I've got my work computer, which has Zoom on it, but it just went through. But eventually, there were things that weren't rhyming. So so it starts breaking down. The rhyme isn't working because it's supposed to be, you know, A is for this and B is for that. And there's just all these drawings, but yeah, slowly it just started falling apart where there aren't words that rhymes with some of the things he was doing. So there was chaos that was ensuing in the ABC book. But I was going to self-publish another book this year for just, you know, general fun. And then I realized once again, I'm creating projects that are getting in the way of actually sitting down and being quiet a little bit. So I'm going to work on all those, but I'm not going to promise myself I actually do the Kickstarter and all that to you know, get 1,000 copies out to readers and all that. So you know, trying not to be so busy about that. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I'm curious about the trajectory of having done the comic strip. You know, when you were first doing it, I assume that your reaction was, "Oh my God, I'm living the dream of dreams. I'm like Charles Schultz. I'm doing the comic strip that I've, you know, aspired to do, and you know, this is like the ultimate peak." You know, what's the trajectory between going from there to, "Oh my God, this is a grind. Will it never end?"
I didn't, during syndication, I never had the grind problem. My ex-wife, she was super supportive, and we'd set up a system where she was working by me staying home with the kids, and then having 5 hours a day to work on the strip before she got back, because they'd go to afternoon daycare and that sort of thing. That allowed me that time to actually work on it nearly full time. And and then for her, she got to develop her executive career, because otherwise we would have stayed at exactly where we were. So it was a nice balance. It was a real partnership we had during that. It got to only a grind when I got to Seattle and I had started doing the strip weekly again, and I'd taken on this job. That it wasn't that Amazon was so busy, because I have probably the best boss I ever had there. It was just that I was really vested in this idea of what we were working on, some of these projects. You know, I wanted to spend that time on it. And suddenly here I was working on something that, oh my God, what am I doing? But a better example, Steve, would be, you know, from, oh my God, I got syndicated to alcoholism. I think that's also the other one that cartoonists fight with. So that one's much more traced. No, the main reason I quit was it had been a business decision. When I shook hands with my wife at that and said, look, I'm going to do this for 5, because I had quit ILM and I had a 6-figure salary there. And I said, I'm going to quit this strip after 5 years if I'm not making 6 figures. And we got to the 5-year mark, and we were in Boulder, Colorado with one of her jobs. And we decided to have a baby. And it was like, okay, then we'll go to the 8-year mark. And when we got to the 8-year mark, I figured, for all intents and purposes, like I said, we were stuck at just about 70 papers, 75 papers, 78, something like that. And I thought we were going to pack it in. I thought King was going to want to pack it in, and they didn't. And I was like, well, now wait a minute. If we're going to do this, I need you to get busy again. You know, Zitz by then had launched into 900 papers. It had sucked all the oxygen out of the market. But it was like, there's room here again. And what hadn't happened at the time was nobody was quitting. You know, Sparky had died, and the strip went into reruns. Lynn Johnson had retired, but she decided to redraw it a little bit, and it went into reruns. Fox Trot had not yet retired. He was the one that probably would have got me my big windfall if I would have stayed in there until Bill quit the daily, because that was 1,000 sales. But over time, like a few creators had died and some strips had gone away, but they weren't in a lot of papers. And I'd see 5 paper jumps and this and that. And we were just slowly not getting anywhere, you know. For you guys at the time in newspapers, with the shrinking of the market, you kind of needed about 200 papers to make 6 figures on your cut. That was kind of always my rough number. Like 200 would get me to 100,000. And, you know, we didn't get there. We didn't even get to 100. And it was much more of a business decision. And like, well, I got to do this. I've got a family to raise, and I've got to go back and bring in the cash that I was worth. And yeah, it hurts, you know, it is what you want to do. But for me, it was never that I got tired of drawing the strip. I don't know how people ever did 2 strips, you know, the Bill Holbrooks and people like that, that, oh my God, you're drawing two of these things and writing them. That to me that's another level of love and of, being serious about cartooning that I've just never, attained. So, yeah. Oh yeah. And Mike Peters. Yeah. Between the so many of the editorial cartoonists, have always been doing that stuff. Yeah. And then Watterson, the 10-year mark was, I get that. And Larson was the same way. And those were really good strips though. And I think both those guys have high integrity. I've met neither of them, but it just seems like that they knew that you're going to go into the next, you're going to kind of go into reruns maybe, right? Oh, David, yeah, what do you say? No. Here's, since it seems like newspaper comic strips are no longer a viable way to attempt to make a living. Yeah, cartoonists, I mean, everybody that was a newspaper cartoonist, they've gone into these books, children's books, the middle grade books, the picture books. Look at look at a lot of the names coming out right now, and it's Terry Levinson, Norm Feudy, Paul Gilligan has a book series, Stefan Pastis had a series. And so that's obviously one way to do it. Yeah, Dave Wamman, also Chris Harrell, or Rob Harrell, I mean, not Chris. So I think that's one of the obvious places is to start working on some short form middle grade book stuff. And the market there went insane. It is wildfire right now. They need content. And then to make those graphic novels, Frank Camuso is doing it. To go into the graphic novel stuff, especially, it takes 1.5 years to write and draw one of those books. And so they need a lot of content. And so that's one of the good things I always told my students at SCAD that, like, for there to be a revolution, you have to have cheap labor and a need for content. And we're not the cheap labor at our age. We're the veterans. And so we're going to compete against all these, College of Art and Design students that are coming out that are willing to work for a lot less money, and sign deals that aren't as respectful to, what an artist needs to live on. But at the same time, there is a need. And so there's much more agents out there looking for content. And I've over the last couple of years, I've just gotten emails like, hey, what are you working on? And like, nothing. But yeah, so that's actually a good one. The web comics thing, I think the advertising on web comics, those days are over. So I had talked with several of the more successful web cartoonists, and it was what really worked was the t-shirts and hats, and that's sort of burned out. And so now it's this Patreon thing of kind of building up maybe 1,000 good fans that'll give you an income as you slowly release stuff to them privately that eventually is published. I've seen a lot of that. Illustration, that's a tough world still. You need an agent a lot of times for that stuff. And again, you're going to be probably working in the book print industry or the those types of markets. The magazine stuff is a lot thinner than it used to be. There's a lot more web illustration, but certainly the ones I've done have never paid like, a magazine illustration does. Even I used to do like spot illustrations now and then for newspapers. I'd get $700 to $1,000 for a 3 to 4 column illustration that, the same sort of thing that Steve, you and I used to just crank out for newspapers, like, here's an illustration, 3 a week kind of a thing, and suddenly you realize you left $3,000 on the table. You did have health care, so let's see. Donna says, yeah, all sorts of things to share development work. Yeah, and exactly that was it's hard figuring out what to share on Patreon, whether they really want the hidden stuff, or if they just want to know a little bit about your process, or just give you money to cheer you on so you can, get some extra coffee and art supplies. I always try to draw a line between where their money's going. And at first I would do like, spreadsheet charts, and then I went, nobody needs this much information. So I'll just tell them that I bought something Like I bought a computer last year, and it came from my Patreon money. Of like I saved up for 18 months and bought a brand new Mac and MacBook Pro. Thank you very much. And I needed it. The old one was dying, so that sort of a thing. Yeah, the agent. Good question, Adrian. There's that book called Writers and the market, the children's book market for illustrators is out there, published by somebody, the writers group or something like that. And there's one also like the book for children's book authors and writers or something. Start with that because it has a list in the back. If you go buy that or just photograph it while you're at Barnes and Noble. But you can get those lists in there. And that's the first place to start, is just start sending out, portfolio requests. And whether or not you want to finish a book before you do that and have something in hand, or finish 3 outlines. But that book really I think really helps you figure out what it is agents are looking for and how to request that stuff. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, illustration agency list. Yeah. And then from there, that's a process. One of the cartoonists I've mentored over the years, he now has a 2-book deal, but he had set up, he's in Ohio, and he just needed a way to stay kind of true to what he was trying to work on. So he set up a whole, website and MailChimp thing so that he could tell people how it was going, in his process. And it took him, I remember reading his emails, it took him about 18 months to get an agent. And he had one agent, and then she decided to not be an agent anymore. A lot of agents are writers that decide to agent for a while, and then they go back to writing, or start a family. All sorts of things come up. So in the middle of that, he had an agent, and then he had to go get another agent, and he was just crushed. But that agent was a quicker find because the other one by then had been developing his work. And so what you're going to do is get enough together, and then get to that stage where you get somebody to help you develop that. And then it's going to go poorly, and maybe you won't get where you need to go, but you're further along. And if that agent doesn't work out, you'll go to the next one. Yeah. Oh yeah. So for me, I still work traditional. I color in the computer, and I scan and then I color. I just like the paper. I love the feel of paper, and I love the brushes and the pens. And that's been part of the joy, is like, I don't want to give that up. And I've got to walk them. So, I've got a Cintiq and all that. And I can't draw with a tablet and look at the screen. I don't have the skill for that. I know so many people can just sit there and do beautiful artwork and scribble on a desk and look at a screen at the same time. And it never comes out the same way as me watching my hand draw things. But yeah, I really love the paper. So I play with that sort of stuff from there. But for me, yeah, paper. Totally need my paper. And I've switched over to a lot of markery stuff, but the markers got better. So those Pigmas and things like that, and some of the brush pens, I'm cheating these days where I'm not dipping my brushes as much as I used to, but who cares? Yeah, Procreate, I used that to death when it first came out, on like 1.0, and I even did some previs stuff for a feature film on that with my finger. I'd thrown my back out, so I was in bed, and I had to like do all these paintings on that, and that went well. But then it's so complicated now. I bought a iPad recently, and I just can't get that going. So I've got to figure that out. It's one of the things I wanted to figure out and kind of enjoy that again. But the drawings are real janky sometimes. It's like it's like I'm drunk, they look like you had a couple glasses of wine. So, yeah, good one.
Yeah.
I should probably run if that helps, but I certainly enjoyed all this.
Oh, this was fantastic.